Chris, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And we were talking a little bit before, and you're based in San Diego, where the weather is probably nicer because we're about to get hit with a hurricane here in Richmond. Recording this in late August or early September now. So it sounds like had a pretty interesting journey. Coming from the Navy, getting into the IoT space. So I'd love to just give you the floor and talk about that a little bit, kind of how you came to founding the company and so on.
Sure. No, thank you, and thanks for having me. Like you said, joined the Navy right out of high school. Did 8 years. I did 4 years on the USS Midway before it was a museum. So that kind of gives you an idea of how old I am. And then 4 years on the Kitty Hawk, USS Kitty Hawk. Got out, went to school, got my degree, started in this space as an inside salesperson with Novotel Wireless, which is now in Seago. Did my time in the corporate world, worked for Novotel Wireless, Kyocera, Motorola, actually Motorola Israel, which was quite the experience. So just woke up one morning and said, I can either do it or I'm never going to do it. And, took the leap and started this in my spare bedroom. And, 12 years later, here we are, so it's been a long journey, but it's been interesting and I've learned a lot. And, it's really one of those things where if you want to do something, do it. Nobody's holding you back. Nothing's holding you back if you're willing to put the time in and the sacrifice. So.
Yeah. And for context, just from a high level, and I probably should have started here. What does the company do? What are you focusing on exactly?
So DCS is actually direct communication solutions. So we're a technical services provider, focused 100% on the IoT space. So, we're kind of that behind the scenes company that will go out and talk to customers, listen to what their needs are, what their requirements are, what they're trying to achieve to really effectively and efficiently run their business. And then we have a very broad, partner ecosystem. And then we'll go out and we can pull from, different hardware vendors and devices, software platforms, connectivity for the airtime, and really pull those three pieces together and give give our customers a IoT solution that really solves their day-to-day problems and real world issues.
Gotcha. And what sort of customers are you typically selling to? What segments?
We primarily today we focus on transportation and logistics and then sensors. So it's a lot of, anything from, dots on a map for landscaping company all the way through ELD, electronic logging of data. We do a lot of custom solutions for tire pressure monitoring, ultrasonic fuel level, cargo monitoring, fuel dispensing, video telematics. And then on the sensor side, it's really, focusing on the transportation side for, the containers, the trailers, the door close, the cold chain management, all the way into, a bar or restaurant to monitor their glycol chillers or walk-in refrigerators. Basically, the world we live in is big data. And, our job is to harvest that big data and then give it back to our customers and partners in a usable fashion that solves their problems. So.
Right. And there's a lot to dig into there. And the idea of almost every object you can think of, potentially getting an IP address and being able to see what's going on with it is just like awe-inspiring. And so to back up a little bit, so you're starting out in the Navy, working at Motorola. How did you sort of become accustomed to this technology? How did you start getting exposed to it? And how would you describe the early days of IoT?
So the early days of IoT, when I started, it was something that was still new. It was called machine to machine at that time. I read an article in a newspaper or a magazine about, how it was going to change the world. And I was like, I went in on that. And, I went in and started the ground floor, right? I took a job. I, worked from there and, it's a space that I love, the creativity, the technology, everything about it is just, it's fascinating because it's not contained to this is all you can do. Right. So, as an example, a lot of people always ask me this, what is IoT to you? I was telling them it's anything. It's everything. If you have an asset, we can put a solution together to tell you what the health of that asset is. Is it functioning properly? Is it functioning efficiently? Predictive maintenance, whatever you want. That's the beauty of IoT, in my opinion, is, it's anything and everything. And,
Yeah, it's super interesting too to think about how your journey and how you got into it. Because I think what we see a lot of, across the board when people get into entrepreneurship and start their own businesses, maybe they start in a corporate job, they learn a lot about something, and then they take that thing off on their own. But it sounds like you got into this through the technology, so you were actually excited about the potential for that, and then pursued a career in it, which is a little different and pretty cool. So what was it that kind of made you want to go off on your own, and how did you start doing that? Like, how did you build your initial customer or client base?
It was really, I did my time in the corporate world. I, spent quite a few years there, was exposed to a couple of different companies, all the processes, the people, honestly, a lot of it was the bureaucracy. It just, not being able to make a decision and move and pivot and, really follow the market and, be flexible. It started to drive me crazy at the end because, I felt constrained or held back. And, I just woke up one day and I said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it now. And if I don't, I'm never going to do it. And, it's definitely a leap of faith, but, if you're willing to put in the time, effort, and sacrifice and work hard, you control your own destiny. And that's really what was more appealing to me than anything, was being able to, really kind of drive my own future and my own destiny in this space.
Right. And I think you mentioned earlier, but how many years ago is that now that you started the company?
12
yeah. And that's kind of a big cliche question. What do you wish that you knew at the beginning that you've learned in that 12 years?
That's a tough one because it changes so fast. And, I think we're in a different market, a different space with the technology. I think if I had the opportunity to do it over again, I would have focused more on, the SaaS solution side earlier. And, we started out as a distributor initially, right? Just distributing other people's products, one-time sale. And, the market's really transitioned into SaaS and recurring revenue. That's the golden goose. That's what everybody's chasing right now. And, that's what really creates the value for companies. So if I had to do it over again, I would have really gone down the SaaS recurring revenue path a lot sooner. But, we're on that path. We're doing very well, and, it's exciting. So.
Yeah. And I'd love to just kind of dig into the use cases, and specifically, what are some of those things that you find exciting about this? Like, where do you see it going? I think IoT a lot of the time is something people are aware of, but they're not really cognizant of how it's going to affect or change their lives. So I'd love to just learn more about how you're using it.
So we do, we're very heavy on the engineering side, which is, it's a reality in our space. Everything's very technical. Just being able to be creative and then, kind of spin up some of our own custom solutions. One of the solutions we have that, we're working on, that we're getting close to completing for launch, is a wireless beer keg monitoring system. So, when you look at the draft beer space, which is specifically what we're going after, there's an assumed 20% loss per keg in the industry. If we can give bar and restaurant owners that actionable data to act on and say, hey, if we can reduce your 20% loss down to 0 or 5 or whatever, 20% loss on a keg of beer is about 25 pints. So 5 pints, you're losing about $125 in profit per keg. So, it's really about creating that ROI with unique solutions and, finding those niche areas where there's an identifiable loss, but it's an assumed loss and it's acceptable, right? Because it's been there. It's always been there. It is what it is. And people don't really, they don't know that there are IoT solutions available today that can be created to, offset those losses and increase their profitability. So it's exciting all the stuff that can be done.
Yeah, and I can only imagine, how far that can go. And it seems like the biggest challenge isn't necessarily tracking things or the machinery. It's more getting humans to look at the right data and respond and change their behavior and so on. So how do you do that?
It's all about giving people I like to tell people, everything is big data to me. Our job is to harvest that big data and give it back to our customers in a usable fashion that gives them actionable insights into what's going on in their business. And then from there, they can take that data and that raw data, which we turn into usable data, and then they can efficiently and effectively run their businesses, right? So a lot of times, I like to also tell people, IoT to me is insurance for your machines, right? And as a society, we're conditioned to buy insurance. We have health insurance, eye insurance, dental, car, house, kid, pet. Why wouldn't you want to have insurance on your machines that are, typically thousands and thousands of dollars? And more importantly, they're critical to your business and your everyday, success in your business. So us being able to provide that data, that predictive maintenance data, and, tell you, hey, you've got a problem. Here's the data, act on that problem before it becomes a critical event and it, has a massive financial impact on your business.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And to shift gears a little bit, I know one thing that you talk a lot about is the effect on businesses by this imminent sunsetting of 2G networks. So can you talk about that a little?
So the 2G, 3G networks are being sunsetted by the top carriers in North America. Everybody's, transitioning to 4G, 5G right now. It's a big challenge, but it's also a big opportunity for the industry, right? Because it's going to allow us to transition everybody from a technology perspective to the latest technology and, really future-proof their businesses and give them that, next 3, 4, 5 years of runway before the next transition starts. So, a lot of these devices have been out there in the field for years. It's very expensive for these cellular carriers to continue supporting and operating these 2G, 3G networks. They've invested heavily on the 4G, 5G side. And it's a transition that, it's imminent, it's in front of us, but it's a good transition, right? Because it's going to bring the market, the space, everybody, up to today's standards and really, future-proof their business for the next couple of years until the next technology shift happens, which, we'll be into 6G, 7G before long.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one thing I love to talk about is that there's the classic kind of like sales and marketing book. I think it's from the 90s called Crossing the Chasm. And it's a very technical book. It's about selling new things, right? And adopters, early adopters, people that adopt later, and getting people to cross this chasm to something that's completely new. So I'm not sure if you know much about that, but I'd love to hear what it's taken to sell this stuff. How you from year 1 through year 12 where you're at now. How did you think about recruiting salespeople, communicating this brand new thing that if I'm thinking I'm a bar manager in XYZ restaurant, I don't want to deal with what is IoT? I just got to go home on time and make my salary. Right. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's that's the big difference between corporate life and, small business life, right? It's, you have to be aggressive. You have to, be willing to go hustle, and, you have to be smart enough to be able to pivot and follow the market, right? So, we like to say internally here that, you're either a innovator, you're a imitator, or you're an idiot, right? So we try to kind of play right between the innovator and the imitator. We like to be a fast follower on certain things. Other things we'd like to kind of see where the market goes and how it matures before we jump in and do it better than other people, right? And that's the beauty of our space as well. And our businesses, we're constantly evolving. We're constantly, changing. The technology's changing, the products, the services, the market. So, being able to capitalize on that is huge for small companies. And I think that's where, small companies like us that have that entrepreneurial spirit, we tend to be successful because we don't get tied up in, this is our product and this is the only thing we do, and take it. And, when you talk about IoT, they're all very similar in a sense, but they're all different, right? Every customer has a different requirement, a different need, a different problem they want to solve, and it's not cookie cutter. And that's really where we excel because of our experience and our engineering talent that we have here.
Yeah, and I like that, innovator, imitator, or idiot. That makes a lot of sense. So
not to offend anybody with that last one. So I just want to.
It's memorable though. And with that, what is it meant, for yourself, kind of in this founder-led position, to bring on others? Like, did you start out as the main salesperson? At what point did you decide to get other people to do it? How did you approach that effort?
So yeah, I started out on my own. My VP of sales he's been with me. We've worked together all the way back to the Navy. So we worked together on the USS Kitty Hawk, and, we've kind of just done this and been together the whole time. It was it was hard to hire other people initially just because of, the cost, the overhead, getting to a point where it's stable. It's one of those things, I think as a small business, it's got to be, you got to have the mentality of it's hard to get hired, but it's quick to get fired. Right. So if you're not pulling your weight, it's exposed very quickly, and you can see who's in the game and who's contributing and who's not. So, hiring people is, it's one of those things where, it's tough because, as a small business owner, there's a massive amount of training and, time and effort that goes into hiring people. And, employee turnover is, it's a huge issue. It's expensive. It's painful to, bring somebody in, train them up for a year or two, get them to a point where they're successful, and then have them move on. Right. So we're very selective on how we hire people and who we hire.
Yeah, and I think that's doubly true for complex products and services. We had a guest on named Sean Campbell who works in the B2B research space, and he has a quote that I'll remember for a while, which is basically how he conducts his salesperson interview processes. And he basically asks the question, "Tell me about a piece of technology that you can't find in a Best Buy," or it could be, maybe there's a better example than Best Buy. And it's tough because, it's tough to understand this technology and then communicate it the right way and everything like that. So I'd love, if you wouldn't mind digging into that a little bit, like how do you think about training salespeople and getting them to first understand what this can do and then communicate it to lay people?
It's, I will say this, the majority of my senior staff and a lot of my employees that, they've been with me for a long time, right? I mean, if you looked at our overall tenure here, senior type people, 10 years plus, have been with me and we've worked together. A lot of the hires we do are, via referral or people we know in the industry, people we've worked with at, other companies. And, it's one of those I would prefer to hire somebody I know that has a track record or a history that I know of, or somebody can vouch for, than to, bring people in off the street. Right. And it's a challenge. I mean, it's hard. And, the other thing I would say is, based on my time in the military and doing this for so long, a lot of it's just, my gut instinct from just the initial meeting, and I can, I feel like within the first 30 seconds to a minute, I can tell if somebody's going to fit in here, if they're going to, be able to, work within our culture, operate within the company and the personalities that we have. And, it's a collaborative effort as well. It's a multi-person interview process, and, it's really trusting my senior executive team and their feedback. And, at the end of the day, it's their responsibility for hiring those people.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And with that, you touched on something important, which is your military service. How is that? What did you learn there that's helped you today in terms of leadership or hiring or anything else?
Two things. One, I learned how to deal with people and the different personalities, and, it really comes down to just how to interact and deal with different people from different backgrounds, cultures, lifestyles, just people in general. And the second one that, is a big thing for me is, details, paying attention to the details. And, I say it all the time here, details will destroy you. If you don't pay attention to the details, you're going to have issues. So dealing with people and details are probably the two biggest things I took away from the military, and, have helped me, into the business world as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think in our company, I found that it's either you want the big 50,000 foot view where you're thinking in big concepts and big ideas, or you want the really zoomed in kind of blocking and tackling operational view where it's like, okay, how does this actually happen? And it's the stuff in the middle that doesn't do anyone any good, right? So that resonates.
And you have to be able to identify, people's personalities, and more importantly, you have to be able to identify, what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses. And you've got to really be able to kind of focus in on their strengths and, help kind of take away their weaknesses and let them be successful by, pushing them and enabling them to go down the path where, it leverages what they're good at. Because, everybody's not good at everything. People are good at certain things, they're not good at other things. And I am the first to admit that.
Right. Yeah. And that's way more useful than trying to get everybody to fix every problem they could ever have, trying to look for improvement on all fronts. So that makes a lot of sense. And with that, another thing that I know you talk a lot about is, the monies and the maintenance and basically getting people to adopt products and become lifetime customers. I think regardless of industry, we deal a lot with the agency space, with service businesses, product businesses too. How have you thought about that? How have you, people use like buzzwords like making the product stickier and that kind of thing. How have you gone about engendering long-term customers?
It's relationships, right? I mean, being able to communicate with people, being open and honest with people, I think that's a lost art anymore. Right. I mean, people, there's a lot of fluff out there. People say, they're trying to push things that aren't really ready, real, whatever the case, being, when we get involved with a customer, it's really more about, understanding that customer, listening to their needs. And, I'm a big believer in, there's always two things to focus in on when we engage with somebody. It's, what do you need to solve your problem? And then what do you want? And if we can focus in and give you what you need to solve your problem, and then work on enhancing that with what you want, it's a win-win for everybody, right? Because the customer gets a solution, or we solve their problem today, but then we can continue to enhance that and solve their future problems and give them more data, more access into visibility into their machines, their business, their facilities, whatever it is. So, again, I would say relationships are key, and, talking to people. I think, that's a lost art right now. And I think, everybody's so used to texting or tweeting or, the digital, kind of communication. Talking to people, that's really where you can hear their voice, you can hear their frustration, you can hear, you can listen to them, and you can ask the questions, and then emails, texts, all the automated stuff, it's open to interpretation, in my opinion. right? You send an email, you're relying on the person on the, that receives that email to understand what you're saying and interpret it the way you're saying it, not be, not take it the wrong way, not interpret it as, oh, all right, well, you said you could do this. Well, no, it's that communication layer at the end of the day.
Yeah, and not only that, I think email people will take the worst possible interpretation because that's how we're wired. We're wired to look for threats, right? So you'll take if there's any issue in an email, people will take the worst interpretation.
It's easy to hide behind an email. It's not as easy to have that face-to-face interaction, even on the video calls where you can see people's body language. You can see if they're paying attention. Are they engaged? Are they excited? Are they frustrated? And then even a phone call, right? Just being able to convey your message and then listen and then, ask questions and not have to keep going back and forth. And again, I think a lot of people hide behind emails and, they're interpreted wrong a lot of times. And it just, it creates a contentious environment sometimes. And
Sure.
I'm a big believer in just pick up the phone and call them, what are the issues, listen, and then fix it.
Yeah. And I think you sort of hinted at something, or you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's to back up a little bit. I think it's interesting because I think that like the way you describe the importance of getting longevity through relationships, I think will be maybe surprising and heartening to some of our audience, because that's how, in the service business, everyone's sort of behaving, right? And I think what maybe I was expecting to hear was like, well, in our product business, it's more about how we set up the product and creating a moat around what we do and making it so people have to use our products. But it sounds like when we're dealing with any sort of complexity where you have to have a human interaction to install this product and set it up, any complex product essentially just becomes kind of like a service business where you have to maintain that relationship.
I think it's key. And, I think that's one of the big values and strengths that we have as an organization, not to use a dated term, but, our Rolodex, if we don't know the answer or if we need something, we know who to call. Right. And that's where a lot of other people, I think they fall short, where, they try to take it on and do it themselves. And, competitors can complement you sometimes, right? You can't, if you go at this market and as a business thinking you can do it all yourself and, you don't need anybody else, you don't have to leverage anything else that's out there, I hope you have deep pockets and a lot of time, because, sometimes it's easier to leverage somebody else, create a solution for your customer, and then it's a win-win for everybody, right? And then you create those relationships behind the scenes that you can continue to leverage in the future.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that will be uplifting for a lot of agency owners that might sometimes have grass is greener syndrome, as I sometimes do. For people selling technology or products, where it's different, but it's not necessarily that much different. So
no, and the other side of it too, just to close that out, is we live in a connected world, right? And if you're not in front of and engaged and, actively working with and communicating with your customers, people have they go to the Google machine on their magic box and they find somebody else. And, you have a very short window to really capture somebody's attention, communicate how you can solve their problem, and then engage on that. And, if you don't, they go to Google and they type in, transportation logistics, solutions, and, they start going down the list. And, that's a reality. And that's why, when we do engage, we listen, because if you don't listen, you don't understand what the customer's needs or requirements are. And then, you're giving them something that doesn't really solve their problem. And then they're not happy. And then by default, they don't become a long-term customer, right? Because somebody like us or me will come in behind you and I'll solve their problem better, cheaper, faster, and, more efficiently. Right.
Right. So, yeah. And it's interesting because like even with new technology, it seems like the awareness moves faster than it used to be. where you really could be the first in IoT and have a huge defensible moat around you. And now it sounds like there's the same competitive elements that we all have to deal with. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at IoT, there's really, in our space, there's three critical components, right? There's hardware, there's software, and there's connectivity or airtime, right? It's, it's hard to say this is my solution that I want you to buy, Mr. Customer, because it may solve some of your needs, but not all your needs. And we take the different approach and say, you tell us what your needs are and what your requirements are, and then we'll go out and we'll find the right piece of hardware. We'll put you in the right software. We'll put you in the right, connectivity offering, and we'll offer that back to you in a bundle that you don't have to think about anything other than, all right, let me put this out there and get trained on it and start using that data. Right. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And to shift gears entirely, I think your background is interesting, kind of coming out of the Navy. What areas do you think should not be on IoT? Because obviously there's concerns about security and hackability and that sort of thing. Or do you think that that's just not worth worrying about?
I think it's definitely worth worrying about. I mean, when you think about it, it's all cellular based, it's all IP based. If you don't have the security layers there and you don't have the security protocols in place, and you're not using, trusted partners on the hardware side, the, software and connectivity side, you do expose yourself and your customers to, threats and risks from, hacking, cyber attacks, whatever. Security is a massive issue. I think, in a lot of the verticals within IoT, it's not as critical because people aren't, they would look at it and say, well, all right, somebody hacks into my sensor that's in my walk-in refrigerator. What are they going to get? Right. But if you're talking about, electricity grids or healthcare devices or, some telematics type solutions, yeah, you don't, security is a big issue. And, sometimes it's, it's better to pay a little more to have that peace of mind and know that, I'm getting a quality product that has all the security protocols and, it covers me from long-term risk. Right. And, saving a few dollars sometimes it'll cost you in the long run. Right. And there's some, I'll leave it. There's some shady characters out there, and there's a lot of backdoor tools and things that people will use to go in and collect your data, and the privacy of your data is a big issue right now as well. Right, just being able to protect. You put a tracking device in somebody's vehicle. You gotta be able to respect and protect their privacy. Who is it? Where are they going? How many miles are they going? Where, there's a lot of valuable data there that can be harvested and sold in, other markets, other areas.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see where it'll go. I guess it kind of seems like the natural market incentives that a hardware company, i.e. Apple, would have are towards privacy. And then the incentives that data companies and marketers would have are against that. Right. So at least that's creating, some level of tension and hopefully protecting us a little bit, like i.e. the Apple, Facebook, iOS 14 situation. So it's super interesting to see where it goes, and kind of getting towards the end of the time. Chris, I'd love to just learn, what are you guys working on these days? What's exciting you? What's the big focus?
We are launching our own cloud-based sensor monitoring platform that'll be device agnostic, technology agnostic for multiple sensor technologies and sensor solutions. We've designed and we're launching our own Bluetooth sensor that does 8 sensor functions in one device. So that'll do temperature, humidity, light, air pressure, accelerometer, proximity, door open, door close, and a multi-purpose button on a coin cell battery, 2-year battery life, IP67. So, we're kind of continuing that evolution from, leveraging other people's hardware and software, and now, based on our experience and what we've, seen over the years, we're taking a lot of that and, starting to create our own internal solutions. So
Yeah.
that's the exciting part to, take us into the next phase of IoT. Working on our wireless beer keg monitoring system. I really enjoy that because it combines my two favorite things, wireless and beer. So it's, I get to do a lot of R&D there. So it's, that's always interesting. And, we're always looking for, we're always looking at things. I think we look at things differently, and we'll go into a place and say, wow, look at all these touch points that you could be pulling the data from to, give back to these business owners. And, and then we look at, okay, what kind of solution can we create out of that? What kind of hardware would we need? What kind of software, how much data, cellular data would it need? So we're always, we're always thinking outside the box, trying to, look at ways to solve people's problems, and more importantly, proactively solve their problems. Because a lot of the use cases for IoT, people don't even know they have a problem, or there's a way to identify problems, or, run their business more efficiently. So that's kind of, that's our big thing, is just trying to be creative, get in front of the market. And that's one of the things I love about, being a small business, and, having the ability to kind of control our own destiny. Right. And, it's exciting. It's fun. A lot of stress, a lot of long hours, a lot of work, but, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, very exciting, and definitely excited to see how this technology kind of ends up in our lives more, in the next few years. So with that, Chris, really appreciate your time. How can people follow what you're up to and get in touch and all that good stuff?
Perfect.
No, sorry, I was just going to ask how can people follow what you're up to and get in touch and so on?
Oh, sorry. They can go to our website, www.dcsbusiness.com. And then there's all the contact information and, links to all of our other, our branded solutions that we sell.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll get that linked up. And Chris, thanks again. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.